Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Maximum Downforce, episode 12 of the 2021 Formula One World Championship. And safe to say, guys, I think it was a bit more of a weirder Grand Prix than we're used to. Joining me, as always, Chris Kavaney, Harry Parkhouse, and Sam Hall. Formula One's return to Spa and the return to racing after the summer break. Once again, guys, hope you had a good summer break as well. Got up to some nice things in the off time, but we're back to work now, and Formula One was also back to work, but a little bit shorter than it normally does. Sam, weird scenes for F1, the shortest race in F1 history. I know you've been taking a look at this as well. The fact that it's beaten by the last one, I think it was the 1991 Australian Grand Prix. Beaten the record by some margin for the shortest race.
Yeah, that race was just over 24 minutes. This one officially was 3 minutes 27 seconds. So I mean, things you could do in that time include about one lap of the Le Mans circuit. So that it's a bit of a shocker from F1, and I'm sure we'll talk about all the reasons for that in the coming moments.
Chris, overall, considering this was Formula One's first race of the summer break, it's not really the way they would have wanted to start the second half of a monumental season.
Yeah, it was very dreary in all aspects, not just the weather, like the actual waiting around and everything. It left a damp image on Formula One, especially like all that for and. It's just like, and the stuff that we're going to discuss, a lot of it is just leaving a lot of head scratching. And I mean, okay, thankfully we've got a race in Zandvoort coming up soon to sort of maybe hopefully make us forget about it. But we're going to talk about it now instead.
And Harry, just like 16 years ago, the 2005 US Grand Prix, fans were left a little bit, safe to say, underwhelmed from the result. And it's like Chris just said, Formula One will want us to forget about it, but this will be remembered for some time.
Yeah, it will. And the reality of it is that there's not much they could have done about it. The drivers from the back of the grid, even George Russell, who was second on those formation laps, whatever they really were, he's saying that he couldn't see a thing. And the main thing that we have to look back at is the driver's safety and the fact that we can't put them at risk, although they do it on a day-to-day basis. In those treacherous conditions, it just wouldn't have been safe at all for them to go up the likes of Eau Rouge and Radion at the speeds they were going without seeing. So, yes, the fans will be ridiculously underwhelmed, but in the end, I think the thing that we can look at is that all 20 drivers are safe. We're having a race at the end of this week, and then it's another one at Monza. So it's a start of a triple header. It's not what we wanted to see, and the point scoring is especially not what we wanted to see, but we do still have a championship to look forward to. The gap's closed as well, not by a massive significant advantage for Hamilton. It's tight up the top. There's still everything to play for, but I guess the underwhelming factor would be the fact that we can't see cars race around Spa, which is one of the iconic tracks within F1.
Sam, as Harry just touched on there slightly, drivers at the end of the race, we can call it, awarded half points. So Verstappen, for example, awarded 12.5 points. The first time we've seen this since the 2009 Malaysian Grand Prix. Do you agree with the decision to award points and for the drivers to go onto the podium to celebrate a victory which they had after 2 laps behind the safety car?
It was the podium, to be honest, that left a really bitter taste in my mouth, because you had, fair enough, Russell's not going to celebrate being on the podium for the first time. I don't blame him for celebrating. Same for Max and same for Lewis. But, I mean, for me, they've got this rule where you've got to complete at least 2 laps, whether that's behind the safety car or not, for it to count as an official Grand Prix. For me, it should be these laps cannot take place behind the safety car. They have to be actual racing laps for it to count. Not for it to come off the lap count, but for it to count towards getting a classification. Because for those outside the top 10, I mean, Fernando Alonso was 11th, and he said he was the first idiot. Because what did he have to gain by going out of the pit lane? He had nothing to gain. He had everything to lose. If he made one tiny mistake, I mean, yeah, he wouldn't lose any points, but he would get a hell of a bill to fix his car. I don't think it was right to award points for that, and it definitely wasn't a race.
Harry, do you agree with this? Because let's face it, like I just mentioned, same again, the 2005 Italian Grand Prix with Montero, Jordan's last podium, he was celebrating it like it was a full-blown victory, when realistically, he had to beat Narain Carter-Kayan and the two Minardis.
Well, the terms of the drivers, you're going to look at it in the point of Alonso, 11th. He had nothing to go out there for. He's going to be disappointed. But you look at Russell, that's Williams's first podium in a long time. And it's Russell's first podium within Formula One. Although it is 9 points, it's still worthy of celebration because of the work that he put in on the Saturday to get that Williams up to P2. And to be honest, I think that Russell does deserve a podium for his efforts on Sunday, or Saturday rather, but whether it was just to score out everyone with their points and half points, I don't believe so. I think that with the race that they considered it, with the couple of laps that they've done, it was not worthy. There was no overtakes, there was no action on track. It was just sat behind a safety car, and you might as well have just done quali for the entire of the weekend. There's no point in awarding the points if there is no race. Vettel, I think Sainz, all of them were coming out and saying that they don't deserve the points that they got because they didn't actually compete the race. And even if it is half points, which are also very annoying to look at in the standings, it's not what the drivers wanted. And in the end, Russell, really, you can think maybe Ricciardo in the McLaren and P4, the only ones to necessarily benefit massively from it. Obviously, Verstappen will take the win and he'll gain that extra couple of points on Hamilton, but it's not what he would have wanted. It's not what anyone wanted in that scenario. And I believe that what the FIA have done throughout the entire weekend has been a very poor job.
Chris, you gave your take to us on the Grand Prix about what happened and the overall result, and I think it was I'm not really sure how to explain it. It was an interesting take on it.
Yeah, I actually think that in a comedic light, this is the greatest race of the season. Obviously comedic, right? So this is how it is. So a championship contender won the race and closed the gap. A championship contender was on the podium, still got some points. A possible future world champion was on the podium for his first time ever in a car which shouldn't really be there. Ferraris both got points. Danny Rick had a good, in quotation marks, recovery. And Nikita Mazepin got fastest lap. I think you could call that a brilliant race.
Anyone fancy digging into that? Sam, maybe?
I mean, he's called it a race several times there. I mean, we'll just look at it. Maybe I'll take it as a fantastic result. Maybe we'll go with that one rather than a fantastic
result.
race.
Yeah,
I'll
change. Result.
Because I mean, if he's calling that a race, I don't think you'll have Cav back here anytime soon.
Hey,
but yeah, I'm the guest here. But it's it was just a mess from Formula One. I mean, everything about it was a mess. They should never have gone out of the pits for the actual race start, which was some 4 hours after it was supposed to take place. The conditions were worse at that point than they had been at any time in the weekend, and the light was fading. So I think it was a last-ditch attempt to get anything. Not that it was worthy of it. Yeah, I don't know. There's so many things that can be done better, and so many changes, hopefully, that will come in. But I mean, Toto Wolff's described it as a freak race. But these freak events do happen, so they've got to take everything they can learn out of it, because when the next freak race happens, we don't want a repeat of this. Monday was never an option to run the race because you've got all marshals, and yes, it's a bank holiday here, but it's not a bank holiday in Belgium and across Europe. So, I mean, Monday, it's a nice idea, but really, as soon as you give it a moment's thought, you go, that was never going to happen, was it?
Actually, I think Sam raises a good point that, when people do like the highs and lows or who did worse at a Grand Prix, it literally is the stewards and Michael Massey and co the whole weekend because of the qualifying. They when Vettel did the whole thing, this should be red flagged, and what happened? Lando Norris had a spin. The whole Sunday was, I think, did Lewis Hamilton call it farcical or a farce?
Yeah, Lewis Hamilton called it a farce. Yeah,
and it's just famous.
It wasn't just Seb either that was calling for it to be red flagged. Lando said that he was calling for it to be red flagged at the same time as well. So I mean, but this is the problem. The drivers need protecting from themselves, because you tell a driver, right, we're going green flag now, even if on Sunday they had have said we're going to go green flag in that dull light with all the spray, every single driver would have kept it pinned through Eau Rouge, up through Radion, and onto the Kemmel Straight. They have no idea if there's going to be a car to the left or the right of them in the barrier. They definitely at that speed wouldn't be able to see a car braking ahead of them. But they will keep it pinned because, as far as they're concerned, Race Direction has said it is safe to race. It is safe to drive at speed. So Lando was never going to lift off the throttle. He was always going to keep it pinned. And this is where Massey, I think he did the right thing in not starting the race, other than the safety car laps, but sending them out behind the safety car, and then afterwards saying, yeah, it was a genuine attempt to start the race. I mean, I don't think I'm allowed to swear on here, but I think there's some cows in the field next to me that are doing something similar to how I would describe that.
I think I understand what you're trying to say, Sam. And just as I was pulling up the results sheet, here's something else: is Google is actually still defining the Belgian Grand Prix. Is still happening right now. All of the drivers are still running, according to Google. So there you go. Really,
that is the longest lap in F1 history.
Apparently so, yeah. But like we've been saying, Max Verstappen took another win this season. Whether you define that as a win is up to you, but it is now classed as a win this season. Red Bull's 7th, I believe, of 2021. George Russell took his first podium with Lewis Hamilton in 3rd. Daniel Ricciardo finished 4th for McLaren with Sebastian Vettel 5th. Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon made it in all French 6th and 7th, with Charles Leclerc lining up behind them in 8th. Nicolas Latifi took Williams' 2nd double points finish in a row with 9th, and Carlos Sainz Jr. took half a point home in 10th. Now, the next thing that I want to raise, hopefully we'll be able to just sort of sweep this through and get talking about the real stuff, the racing that we saw over the weekend, or what we could at least, is the fans. Now, as a person who was supposed to be at this race due to the pandemic, could not go. But I couldn't go, in all honesty, because if I were there and if I had paid so much money as I have for the tickets next year, and to go and report at this race next year, if I were to do that last weekend and it was a complete washout, I would demand my money back, as I'm sure you would, Sam, I'm sure you would, Harry, and I'm sure you would too. I just want to ask all three of you, we're starting with Harry, then we'll go to Chris, and then we'll go to Sam. Should the fans have their money back? Because Stefano Domenicali is adamant that the fans will not have their money back. They will be compensated, I believe is the quote that's been taken from him. Whereas Lewis Hamilton, Daniel Ricciardo, Sebastian Vettel, they've all been saying that these fans should have their money back. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, really, because on one hand, you can't control the weather, but on the other, Formula One promised a race and they could not deliver a race with what happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one for everyone involved, really, because the FA, it's not like they want that to happen. They don't want it to be rained off for the entire weekend because it's not going to attract much attention to it. But I believe that the right thing to do at the moment is probably to say to the fans, look, there's obviously not going to be another race this year. Compensation is probably not good enough for them. They're out there for a long time on that Sunday to get the race. Some people might have obviously come there for more than that, for the qualifying day, for the practice days. So they might have got somewhat of their money's worth. But in terms of everyone, they certainly didn't. The way that the fans left the track as well was quite abysmal, actually, and left the sort of the stands as well, especially by the Camel Straight, with the littering. A lot of them did not deserve to get the race there after what they did afterwards. But it's a tough one to call. I believe that if I was going there, obviously you would want your money back. Watching it on TV, you'd say that even watching it and not getting the race, you probably want your money back if you weren't going to go there. But it's a hard one to call, and you can understand, I guess there is a point you can understand that they won't want to refund absolutely everyone who went there on race day, as it will cost them too much money and they didn't even get the race themselves. So it's a hard one to call, but I would probably be leaning towards giving the fans their money back, because you want to go to Spa to watch the cars fly up over Rouge, one of the longest tracks on the calendar. It's always going to be a spectacle, and we didn't get it because of the weather. It's hard to control, but in reality, it's not what the fans came for. They wanted to see a race. They didn't get it. So it's a tough one to call, but I would, if I was in the position of Stefano Domenicali, I would say, well, you probably could have your money back, because it's not fair for the fans who went there for the race specifically.
And Sam?
To be honest, I think the fans do deserve their money back. What Domenicali has said is that obviously F1 provided what it classes to be a race. So as far as F1 is concerned, it has no problem. It has satisfied its obligation. And also what he said is they don't actually handle the ticketing. All that is done by the promoter, which is the circuit in this case. So really, it's Spa that has the problem, not Formula One, because if it's Spa that dealt with ticketing, they're the ones who took the money for the tickets. They're the ones who have to pay it back. F1 has satisfied its contract, however dubious that might have been. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, yes, the fans left it in a bit of a state, or in a complete state. I've seen the picture along the Camel Straight as well, and that was not great to see. But yeah, the fans there on Sunday do deserve their money back. The rest of the weekend, they got the action that they paid for. So if you got a 3-day ticket, you get your money for the Sunday back. Because the way I look at it as well is you pay for, if you're going to a gig, you don't pay for the warm-up act. You go for the headline act. In this case, they got the warm-up act of the Porsche Super Cup, and they got the F3. They didn't get the headline act of the F1. So, yeah, it's contractually F1 is fine. In reality, I don't think F1 wants this PR storm on them, and they'd probably be better just paying up.
Chris, let's get your take on this as well.
Not gonna lie, what Cesar already been said, that I personally think that they should get their money back somewhat. I mean, I agree that what the state that they left the track is very festival-esque. I've been to some festivals and I've seen what the mess that can bring. And yeah, it looked very similar and it didn't look nice. Those people should be ashamed of themselves, but even so, like, they were going to a circuit hoping to see a race and they never got it, so you can understand their frustration. But yeah, I personally think they should get their money back for that. However, that's going to go about because, as Sam said, it's most likely the circuit that provides the tickets, and the circuit promoters are going to be like, go to Formula One and go, hey, you didn't give us a race. Contractually you did, but theoretically you didn't. Do you know what I mean? Like on paper you did, but when you look at it, you didn't really. So there's going to be a bit of spat back and forth, I fear. But F1 could avoid that by just trying to pay up, and I think that would be the right call.
Maybe if Hamilton and Ricciardo are so adamant that the fans should get their money back, perhaps they could open up their checkbooks, maybe?
Yeah, I think they've got some spare cash lying about somewhere.
I'm 99% sure Hamilton could probably find that down the back of the sofa. But anyway, speaking of Hamilton, Verstappen, because of this result, the 5 points he gained over Hamilton, because of the double points, I believe it was 5 points. He's closed the gap down, Sam. This championship is now as close as it was at the start of the season, just 3 points, only 2 more points than what we saw after Bahrain. So, after Muller, sorry, not Bahrain. It's really looking to be a championship now, which the fans deserve, and I think after the race, I think we do deserve a good championship fight now.
Yeah, it's definitely a good championship fight. It's going to be one that goes probably down to the wire. I would be very surprised if it's over more than 2 races before the end of the season. I mean, let's hope it doesn't go to Abu Dhabi because no one wants a championship decider there. It's never that great, is it? But no, I mean, Verstappen, I think I've thought all this season really that he's probably the favourite to win it because Lewis is hungry for it, but I think Verstappen and going for that first championship, you're naturally a bit more hungry to get success and to get that trophy, tick that life box. I think Lewis, as much as he wants it, it's very much if I win, I win. If I don't, then I'll always come back next year and go for it again.
So, hypothetically, if Hamilton weren't to win this championship, do you think if, for whatever reason, Mercedes couldn't deliver a strong car next season, he's got this new 2-year deal, do you think if after next season, hypothetically, Mercedes is, obviously this is very unlikely, the 7th fastest car, Hamilton finishes just inside the top 10, do you think he'd stay for another year?
No, I don't think he would stay there for another year. I mean, he's got 2 years on his contract, but I don't think he would stay there anymore.
Okay. Chris, what's your take on that?
I mean, you're basically saying if the Mercedes turns into last year's Ferrari, aren't you? That's what you're saying.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's won what he's needed to win. Some people can, I always thought a good sportsman knows when to quit. And if, say, that was the outcome for that car, he probably would say, you know what, I've done what I needed to do.
This is the reason why I like podcasts, although obviously nothing happened in Belgium. The reason why a podcast with less to talk about is so good is because we can delve into these hypothetical situations. Because realistically, Harry, you've got Verstappen, he's tied in for a long while. I think the end of 2023, beginning of 2023. Hamilton, end of 2023. Same with Leclerc. I think, from my opinion anyway, Leclerc is really the only one who I can see, if Ferrari does not challenge for the championship, Leclerc is the only one that I can see remaining for the rest of his contract.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Leclerc's going to be at Ferrari for a long, long time. In terms of Hamilton's situation, it's if it was to happen, say Mercedes go down to 7th, so sort of a mid-table car, I wouldn't see Hamilton sticking around for long at all. If Hamilton is fighting down there, other teams at the top, they're going to be fighting to get him. I think more or less than Hamilton fighting to get out. When you've got Lewis Hamilton on the grid, you want him in the best car. You want him in at least top 2 because he will perform no matter what. He will make that second best car look like the best car. And in terms of Verstappen at Red Bull, obviously being a Red Bull junior and had ties with the team since God knows when. So I do think that Red Bull, if they can put out a decent competitive package like they have done this year for the 2022 car, I think it's no doubt to see Verstappen will probably continue with Red Bull for a long time as well, actually, alongside Leclerc. But the thing that is slightly worrying to me at the moment, looking at the current grid, is the young drivers in 2022. Obviously, you're going to want an experienced head in the team, someone who knows what the regulations are going to bring in, someone who knows obviously the structure of the team and the car itself. So obviously having the likes of Hamilton, your Verstappen, your Leclerc, even your Vettels, they're going to be important. But the likes of Alonso, who's kicked on as well, he's probably taking up a seat, 40 years of age, and he's still kicking fine, to be fair to him. But Kimi Räikkönen, he's got to go, in my opinion. Is Giovinazzi good enough? Is Latifi good enough? Mazepin? There's a whole lot of scenarios, even Stroll maybe at the moment. There's so many scenarios for these younger drivers to try and get into F1 with these new regulations that I don't think will happen and hinder potentially superstars in the future career. And you will see maybe F2 drivers like Nick De Vries. He didn't have an option to get into F1 when he won the F2 World Championship. He's now gone off to Formula E and won that. Will he be in Formula One this year? I do hope so, because if he doesn't, I can't see a way for him into Formula One ever, which is a real shame because he's a talented driver. And the likes of these old drivers, yes, they are quality to have on the grid. We love seeing Raikkonen. Is it time up for him now? Yes. Do they need to bring young guns in? Yes. So the sort of hypothetical situation of contracts is interesting for next year, but a lot of teams are now tying down the likes of obviously Ocon and Alonso, most recently Perez as well for Red Bull. So it will be an interesting grid next year. Not much change, but I am still worried about the hindrance of the younger drivers, especially ones in Formula 2 performing well at the moment.
You just mentioned the Mercedes young driver pool there. Hamilton's possible teammate next season, George Russell, taking his second front row start and his first podium, as we've talked about. But realistically, Chris, the idea of George Russell scoring his first ever podium has been slightly died down because of all of the different factors which went into this weekend. The rain, the fact that we had no race. Realistically, when you look at it, there wasn't a race yesterday. There was just laps behind the safety car. But George Russell's performance in qualifying, especially to take note of, was supreme. It really was. You have to admit it.
Yes, I'm a person who qualifying is great, but races, unless you count Monaco and this one, aren't won on Saturdays. They're won on Sundays, and you can qualify as high as you like, but if you fall down the order, I think that will kill your stock, as it were. I mean, he does need a better car. Well, we all agree on this. Like, if he was in that Mercedes, there would be some magic happening, in my opinion. He would qualify well, and he could actually not fall too far down the order to actually get something out of it. And in conditions like this, when it's the wet weather, the car is less of a factor. It's more about the driver. So it really does display how good he is. I mean, the great racing drivers, when you see them in the wet, you think of if I go to the typical one of Senna at Monaco, or I go to Schumacher at Barcelona in '96, that they perform something amazing in the wet, which makes you go, "Oh, now this is somebody." And no matter what day you do it on, it should be something to be noted. And what George Russell did on Saturday, we know he's good on Saturdays, but that is special.
Sam, obviously you've got a lot of contacts in the Formula One world, a lot of different ways of getting information. Mercedes and George Russell, surely it's a done deal at this point.
Well, yeah, talking to Toto across the weekend, I mean, he's indicated clearly that a decision has been made. I mean, he's sorry about that. No, he said sort of decision has been made, but then backtracked slightly and said that he's made his decision, but not necessarily everyone involved has made their decision. I think it's going to be George at Mercedes. All of the body language from Toto, all the indicators are that it's going to be George, but they're not going to make an announcement until both drivers have got their futures sorted for next year, whatever championship that is, or whatever team that's with. So until all the contracts are signed, there won't be an announcement. Hopefully that will be sooner rather than later. But especially after George's performance on Saturday, I can't see it being anyone other than George. Ross Brawn's come out today and said as well, Mercedes got an easy decision. It can't be anyone other than George in that car next year.
And as we have said And as you have just said, surely it is George in the car. There's been a lot of speculation towards where Bottas would go. Alfa Romeo, Williams, Harry. With the fact that Alfa Romeo, especially, and I do want to touch on this. I've got a point to bring up Alfa Romeo in this show. It's just sort of getting harder to define where Bottas would go. It does look like the idea of De Vries going to Williams, we'll touch on that later as well, is a possibility. It looks like Nicholas Latifi will be staying. Alfa Romeo, the amount of drivers that I can't keep track of anymore, how many drivers have been linked to that seat. It's a strange one for Bottas.
Yeah, I think that it would be a shame to see Bottas leave the sport, considering when he started at Mercedes in his second year in Mercedes, he was pushing. He has wins under his belt. He has pole positions, and at some races he has challenged Hamilton to the limit. So to say he's done a bad job overall in his entire Mercedes career is harsh, but you can understand why people might say it, especially after this season. Last season, the ending was poor as well. He's lost his form. It seems Hamilton is just completely barnstorming him in every sort of regards, other than FP1, where Bottas seems to shine every single time. But it would be harsh to see Bottas leave. Personally, I do believe that he will go to Alfa Romeo. I think Alfa Romeo's lineup next season will probably be Bottas and hopefully Callum Ilott. I think that they need Alfa Romeo a change. They need change in scenery, and they need a massive boost. To me, Alfa Romeo are the most boring team on the grid at the moment. You look at everyone else; they've got a headline act. They've got something that's happened to them this season. They've had good performances. Realistically, the only other team who hasn't had good performances is Haas, but they've got Mazepin, so they've always got talking points. Alfa Romeo are probably the most dull team on the grid at the moment, and to get a double driver change in there for the next season, fresh regulations, I think would be good for them. They need a kick. Valtteri Bottas being a leading head, obviously coming off of the Mercedes, going into an Alfa Romeo will be certainly a change of scenery for him. But we saw what he did in the Williams, which wasn't a bad car, wasn't as bad as the Alfa Romeo compared to the rest of the grid this year, but it wasn't a car necessarily challenging for the race wins, and he was on the podium quite a few times in that Williams. So him in an Alfa Romeo could be a good step for him, and it could solidify. What am I trying to say here? It could solidify. That's the one. Solidify his position within F1 for a couple more years at least. I think that seeing him go instantly, maybe retiring from the sport or going into something completely different, would be harsh. But he does deserve a seat, I believe, at an Alfa Romeo, and they will need that experienced head, especially if Kimi Räikkönen, as rumoured, will be retiring, or, well, not necessarily hopefully, but I think it is time for him to hang up the gloves in this sense. So realistically, Bottas could have an open seat, as the one at Mercedes at the moment has to go to George.
Sam, you're pretty handy with Photoshop. Is there any chance you could make a logo for Alfa Romeo, something along the lines of Alfa Romeo, the most boring team on the F1 grid?
To be honest, it's got to be either Alfa Romeo or Alpha Tauri. Neither are particularly interesting at all, are they? I mean, at least Tsunoda crashes into something every now and again. So that's at least something for Alpha Tauri. But no, I mean, I don't know where Bottas is going to end up. Alfa Romeo is an option. Williams is an option. I mean, to be honest, there's no bad options for next year because we don't know who's going to come out on top. I mean, Honda in the last year that they were Honda, they were absolutely dreadful. You wouldn't have gone there in a million years. The next year, they turn up as Brawn GP and they absolutely storm both championships. So I don't think it's going to be as extreme, the difference next year. But I mean, Alfa Romeo, why not? Williams, why not? If you were Russell, I mean, this is the last year you would want your contract to be ending because Mercedes could be the 5th best team next year. I don't think that will happen, like I say, but they could really slump and Williams could absolutely nail it. And if him and Bottas do just swap seats, Bottas could be world champion just by Williams finding a silver bullet. But I mean, you were just saying about Bottas being sort of not great this year or at the end of last year, he's won one race in 28 races for Mercedes. In a car that's that dominant, fair enough, it's not the dominant force this year, but we're only 12 races into this season so far. So one race win in almost 2 years in a Mercedes, that's not good enough at all. I mean, if he did that in a Red Bull, he would have been out of the door 3-4 races ago. And to be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if Mercedes had have gone, we're changing this now, this is not good enough. But obviously they don't want to upset Lewis and get rid of the driver that apparently Lewis has told Valtteri he wants him as his teammate next year. So do you keep Lewis happy, or do you get in the driver who's going to push him and potentially take the championship away from him? It's just a matter of what they want, really, isn't it?
Chris, well, give me your take on the whole Mercedes situation.
I wish they could make their mind up, not gonna lie. I mean, we're in silly season right now, and yeah, the rumours get flying about and all sorts. But it comes down to, do they want... It's like, they want high percentage results. And what can we clarify is a high percentage result? One racer that does everything and wins, and the other picks up pieces in 5th and 6th and all sorts. Or is high percentage results having two drivers who are going to go for it, but could cause dramas, could cause stirs, could cause crashes within each other. Ultimately, it's excitement for the sports and possibly good revenue for your team in terms of, all the marketing. It depends. Which do they go for? For fans, they would rather the latter. They want, they want to see two people properly go for it. Ferrari for years had the whole driver 1 and 2, didn't they? And what happened? They won lots of races, lots of championships. They had a few iffy moments, but then when you compare that to two drivers who go lights out, like you saw Lewis and Fernando at McLaren, how did that go? It got a bit sour, didn't it? Exciting for us, sour for them, and two teams want a sour environment. That's what I think is plaguing their minds right now.
Stepping away from the modern era of Formula One, just for a bit, as you guys know, my favourite segment on the show on this day, we take a look at things that happened on the day of recording in Formula One history, and for once in a while, it's actually the same Grand Prix we're looking at, the Belgian Grand Prix 2009. Giancarlo Fisichella took his first ever pole position for Force India, and the team's first as well. So my question to you three is, over their time as Force India, and that is key, Force India, how many pole positions did they take?
Ooh.
Start with Chris, then Harry, and then finish off with Sam.
Pole positions? Oh, God, I don't know. Genuinely don't know. I'm trying to think how many races they actually did overall. I don't know, probably... I can't think of many, so I'll go with just the one. I can't think of anybody else.
Harry?
I'm pretty sure it is just the one as well, actually. I'll go just the one.
And Sam?
Yeah, I'm not going to be caught out by this. This is just the one.
Yeah, it is just the one. I wanted to see if I could catch some of you guys out, but for the first time, all three panelists have got the answer correct. Topher isn't here to enjoy it, so what a shame! What a shame. That's very unfortunate.
I just know. Yeah, either he get it wrong, or when he hears this, he'll say it straight away, and he'll say the answer like 8 times before I've come up with my answer. I just know he'll be like, "It's one for God's sake, it's one." I just know. So if anything, that's a really good question to annoy him a bit.
That's what you get for going on holiday, unfortunately. But
Exactly.
sticking with the Silverstone-based team, Aston Martin now. Sebastian Vettel during qualifying calling for a red flag, Harry. I know you like to talk about Sebastian Vettel, so I'll give you this question. Lando Norris's sudden crash after that, hitting the barrier, spinning across Eau Rouge. We've seen this type of instance so many times. The W Series accident just mere days before that on the Friday in qualifying, I think it was. Glad to hear everyone is okay from that as well. Just to cover that. But either way, it's just one of those things where both Norris and Vettel called for a red flag, and neither of those drivers they weren't listened to, were they?
No, they weren't. And to be honest, at the time when it happened, we saw I believe the helicopter camera of Norris going up Eau Rouge, and Brundle said the moment the car went out shot, said, "Is that McLaren gone round?" And looking at it, he knew instantly that McLaren was gone. And Vettel said it, I believe, just coming into sector 3 when he said it on his out lap. Norris was just ahead of him, I believe, obviously, because I think Vettel came over at like a medical car towards him. But Michael Massey does not listen to the drivers. When you've got a 4-time world champion who's that experienced in these conditions saying, this is not safe, we need to red flag it, you've got to listen. When Norris himself was the man who had the crash saying he's aquaplaning like mad on the straight, it's a ridiculous thing to do. You know the speed that they're going to carry up that hill up Eau Rouge, and especially what you said, Will, with the W Series crash that we had before, not to mention what happened a couple of years ago with Anton Hubert. You've got to look at the dangers that the track does provide. It's a lovely track. We love going to Spa, but safety-wise at the moment, it's not optimal. And to have those conditions in that qualifying session, when you know that the drivers are going to push in Q3 as hard as possible, Lando Norris, probably the hardest pusher of the entire qualifying session, probably would have got pole, or would have been very close to Verstappen's lap time anyway. To not red flag that, to let them go out and to let them do their flying laps was a disgraceful decision from Michael Massey. And the decision with the clock as well on Sunday, and what I don't know what was going through the FIA and the stewards' mind this weekend, it was really poor from them. And the only thing I can say is just we're lucky that Lando didn't get that car flipped. Realistically, we're lucky that it was just a spin into the wall and the back end, because that could have been a serious damage towards Lando. He seems quite shaken up by it anyway. So at any quicker speed or any different velocity, couple seconds before or after that crash, it could have been a serious danger for him. And we know how talented of a driver he is, and we know that he could have been definitely front row starting for the race, quote unquote, anyway, which would have been some good points for McLaren. And in the end, he didn't score. So Michael Massey should be ashamed of not, although it was relatively tight at the point of sending them out. The rain got worse and he wasn't having any of it until there was an incident, which was pretty disgraceful, knowing the amount of drivers with that experience over the radio saying this should be red flagged. And thankfully, Sebastian Vettel obviously went over to check if Lando was okay with a little thumbs up. And Vettel was fuming over the radio. And I do not blame him at one bit of what happened in that qualifying session. Qualifying was a bit of a mess at the end. The race, quote unquote, was an absolute mess. And it wasn't a weekend for FIA and the stewards to be proud of at all.
And the corner as a whole, Sam, Eau Rouge, especially this weekend, it's been brought to attention that certain aspects of the corner have been deemed unsafe by several fans. Obviously, next year and for 2022, to make the track safer for bikes, I believe, some of the walls are being changed, some of them are being moved. They're overhauling the safety elements of the corner, but is there something that needs to be changed? Now, I want all three opinions on this. So we'll go to Sam, then we'll go to Chris, and then Harry, I want your opinion after. It's Eau Rouge is a divisive corner. You got one hand the fans who are saying that it's one of the most iconic corners in motorsport. You can't change it, and the others putting safety first.
Yeah, to be honest, they're going to be making changes. Like you say, they're going to be pushing some of the barriers back. They're going to be changing the angle of them, and they're going to be putting gravel in on either side of the corner. So the idea of the gravel is that it will actually catch the cars and they won't bounce back out across the track, which obviously at the moment, as we saw from the W Series incident, from the F3, from Aitken the other week, from even going back to the Hubert one and the Lando one this week, we've seen that cars do just hit the wall, bounce back out, and that is the most dangerous bit, because if, say, Seb hadn't have seen the yellow flags and was coming at 170 miles an hour like he would be normally up that hill, he would have gone straight into the side of Lando. And then we could be talking about something so much worse. I personally don't think gravel is entirely the answer, because yes, it will stop a car from bouncing back out again, but and I asked Daniel Ricciardo this over the weekend, if a car catches in the gravel, then the car may well roll. It may well roll over the top of the tyre barriers. And then how high does the catch fencing, how strong does the catch fencing need to be to prevent a car from flying into the crowd? I mean, that's the worst case scenario, but obviously F1 needs to operate to the worst case scenario. You can't go, oh, this is what will probably normally happen, and ignore the worst case. It's that worst case you've got to go, well, if this happens once, we're absolutely done for. So I do think there needs to be changes. I think F1 will make the circuit itself will make the changes that are needed now. And hopefully F1 will do the sensible thing and apply as much pressure to the circuit to make it as safe as is possible. The corner will still be an incredible experience for the drivers, especially in lower categories. But it will just be that bit safer if you mess up. And we shouldn't confuse things like runoffs with or extra areas of runoff and extra gravel with ruining a corner. It won't ruin the corner at all.
Chris, how do you respond?
I don't think gravel is the correct option, because I just find that if a car bites the gravel, the car, like Sam said, it will give a tendency to roll, or it can make a car sort of bounce a bit and potentially make a car almost turn into an airplane. It could do that, especially when you think about it. They're going into that corner probably about 170, 180 miles an hour. Say they do a mistake, they lose some speed, scrub it to say 150, they hit the gravel at 150, 140. A car could oscillate and move, bring in a roll, or take off. It could be either or. But like, it obviously depends what angle the car goes in, and yada yada yada. I personally believe the better effort solution would be a more abrasive tarmac, like they have at Paul Ricard, like they have at Abu Dhabi. You know, something to make the cars, in terms of grip, slow down. Because when they go through Eau Rouge, most of the time when they spin, like we saw with Norris, all the W Series cars, the wheels were mostly on the ground. I say mostly. And so that the grippy tarmac would hopefully slow them down enough before they get to the wall. The next answer for that, forgive me, the next answer for that I don't think should be a tyre wall, because I think a tyre wall, if you hit it straight on, it does its job. If you glance, maybe say at 45 degrees, 60 degrees, I have a funny feeling that you have a tendency to bounce off. I think that's what we saw in the W Series crash, a tendency that they bounced off and potentially put themselves in the firing line of not just the racing line but other cars, like we saw. If they were Tech Pro, you can shape them how you want, you can make them as deep as how you want. They in terms of circuit packaging, they're easy to store compared to tires. And on a safety grounds, they are more about absorbing the crash rather than rebounding. The whole every action is a reaction. Rather than making a car bounce back, it just takes it all in and goes, okay, we're taking this huge force that comes from a car and bringing it right down. And I just think that would be a safer option for the corner. They don't have to change the layout of the circuit. in terms of the actual tarmac, just the wall itself, and I think that will make Eau Rouge safer.
And Harry, give me your thoughts on this as well.
Well, there's obviously not much they can do with the elevation of the track, and I don't think that's necessarily the problem. I think that it only really becomes a problem when there's a crash up ahead and it's sort of blind going into the corner at that speed. I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert on tarmacking on F1 tracks, to be honest, because I'm not. But looking at the crashes that have happened over the past, especially through the top of the corner, it does not seem, and on the curbs as well, it doesn't seem like there's that optimum level of grip a driver would want going at that speed. So in terms of gravel, I do watch a lot of MotoGP, which is obviously different, and the speeds they go at crashes is obviously a lot different as well. But when you're at a high velocity on a motorbike anyway, on gravel, when that moment it hits, it will flip. That's probably due to obviously the weight of the bike is a lot different to the weight of an F1 car. But if they are going at severe speed going up Eau Rouge and they place gravel, there's not a second of me that will believe that the moment they hit the gravel, the car's just going to stop. The car's either going to barrel roll or just continue just ploughing straight up into the wall. So gravel, I don't think is necessarily an optimum idea, and I don't think it's going to help at all. And in fact, probably end up causing the marshals, especially if there is a crash, a lot of delays up there as well. So the grip levels are not optimum. I completely agree with Chris in the sense that the tarmacking and the grip levels need to be improved up that corner. And the main reason why you go to Spa really is to watch the cars fly through Eau Rouge. Yes, it's a terribly dangerous corner. You think Kevin Magnussen back in 2016 with his crashes into the barrier, and obviously the crashes that we've mentioned before in the W Series one that happened obviously this weekend. It's becoming hugely dangerous and something that needs to be pointed out. And it's a step in the right direction if they are putting gravel in, obviously, because they're trying to do more safety measures for a dangerous corner, which is what the FIA should be looking at. But is gravel the right answer? I'm not sure yet. And tyre barrier wise as well, on that sort of aspect, all the crashes, as Chris said, that we have seen when they go into the barrier, it is just a straight bounce. There's not exact, when you hit the barrier, you stop. The only real thing that's happened at Eau Rouge when it's just stopped was Verstappen when he had the suspension failure going up Eau Rouge. The tyre barriers, they tend to bounce, and I don't think any improvements on that necessarily are going to make too much of a difference. It is due level to the grips that are going on the curbs, and I can barely take that corner on the F1 game, let alone them going that speed in real life in the F1 cars, even the W Series cars. It's ridiculous speed to go up that corner and lose grip. It must be a terrifying feat, and of course doing it in the rain like Lando Norris must have been even worse, to be honest. And something does need to be done. I'm not quite sure what the perfect solution is, but at the moment it is quite hazardous. It's lovely to watch the cars go through. Obviously, you go through safely, and to watch like Gasly's overtakes and all of Mark Webber's overtakes, it's brilliant to watch. But when it goes wrong, it's catastrophic, and it just causes major incidents. And of course, back in F2 a couple of years ago, it can cause severe accidents, and stuff does need to be changed about it, and it mainly should be due to the tarmac, I believe, like Chris said.
The only problem or let's say only the elevation is an issue. One of the things with that is, of course, I'm just looking at an image of Eau Rouge and Radion now. When you go offline, obviously it's on like a hill, isn't it? So there is you're going from uphill to level. So in terms of racing situations, you're doing a negative G pushover. You're going over negative G. When you've got lots of downforce, that's fine because you don't feel that. But if you say spinning or on a bike, you're losing control. That negative G will mean that ultimately there's nothing on your tires for grip. So if they were to be like sensible about it, they'd have a longer runoff, which doesn't have that much of an inclination change, along with either gravel or I would prefer a more abrasive tarmac. I think that would be a solution. And in terms of the Radeon section, where like where we've seen crashes as well at the end of Bruges, I'm trying to picture Spa in my head. Could they extend the runoff over there, and also put tarmac and or gravel and or Tech Pro on that side to prevent something as well? Is that possible?
I mean, technically, it's possible. That there are so many different scenarios that we could have to try and make this corner safer, and that's the question that I'm going to be posing to our listeners today. Is what do you think should be done about the Bruges situation, or do you think it should just be left alone? You can actually email us or go to our social media at Downforce Radio. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you want, and just let us know your opinion. If you're listening on Spotify, then you can do that, or you can comment it down in the YouTube comments down below. Just a couple more things before we wrap up, guys. Just a few things that I wanted to touch on is the fact that I'll give you one each. You can decide which one you want. But Sergio Perez and Fernando Alonso have both signed 1-year contract extensions with their teams. Alpine will continue with Alonso, whereas Perez will be going on with Red Bull. Harry, do you want to take Perez or Alonso here?
I'll take Checo. In terms of Checo's performances this year, obviously you look at Baku with the race win, and at the start of the season, obviously he was pretty level on qualifying pace, and actually beat Verstappen at, I believe, Imola. Since that win in Baku, has Perez been on the best form possible? No. Has he been as near as Verstappen as he would have wanted? Probably not. Has he been the best second driver Red Bull have seen since Ricciardo? Yes. The right decision, I believe, was to keep Perez at Red Bull. In reality, what Red Bull obviously like to do is the promotion from AlphaTauri, the junior teams, to the main team. And at the moment, you've got Pierre Gasly, former Red Bull driver, Helmut Marko, clearly not keen to go back on his own word, and Yuki Tsunoda, who might not necessarily be ready for F1 in general, let alone a seat in one of the best cars, if not the best car on the grid at the moment. So the decision to keep Perez and let him grow within the season and the car, I believe, is a good decision. Overall, he's a fan favourite and one that I believe will get stronger as he gets more adjusted to that Red Bull car. He was off to a flying start and he already has a win under his belt. Has he been having the most optimal performances? No, especially considering what happened this weekend with the silly crash, really, which costed Red Bull that P7, I believe, in the end. So it would have been some valuable points in the Constructors' Championship, in which I believe they trail by 7-ish points, which isn't much in the grand scheme of things, but every point does count at the moment, especially with races like that we had on Sunday. So might have tailed off a little bit at the moment, but I believe that if Perez can find a little bit of a groove, get, say, a podium, maybe that top 4 finish that he probably should be getting in that Red Bull, he can spur on, and I believe that signing of the contract for Perez is probably a good decision for this season, at least. If next season he starts to underperform, then you've got to look at him and you've got to ask questions. But at the moment, I'd say that it's probably the right decision to keep Perez at Red Bull for the season. The season's coming.
Thinking about Fernando, I would say it is a good decision. He has surprised me, certainly. I thought maybe, he'd be too old and is taking up a young driver's seat, and that's what I thought at the beginning of the season. But he actually has surprised me somewhat as the races have come along, especially when he made his car the widest car in history versus Lewis Hamilton. I think that is very good going and showing still what a wily old fox he is, kind of thing. So I think the extension of his contract is a good one on that ground. At the same time as, you in terms of going to the next season with the new regs, an experienced head can help you. And Alpine have got a lot of moving forward going on there with their Le Mans performance and all sorts, and the win at Hungary. So I think having him on board will help them with the future, with the whole new car, and and hopefully sets up that car for the next person.
Well, there we go. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Harry. And thank you, Sam. And a special thank you to everyone listening at home. It's been another wonderful episode of Maximum Downforce for all of us to record and hopefully for you to listen to. Fingers crossed the next Grand Prix at the first ever Dutch Grand Prix since 1985 in Zandvoort will be a bit more impressive. Just remember to check out our social media at Downforce Radio on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, as I mentioned earlier. You can also check out the website, downforceradio.uk, if you want to listen to the radio station. Maybe you already are, or check out the latest and greatest news articles in the world of motorsport. I hope you have a wonderful evening, morning, afternoon, whenever you're listening. Goodbye.
Go, go, go! Anytime and immediately! This is amazing! The worst start for a